The Montana morning rose slow and gold, the kind that made the dust shimmer like old coins scattered across the prairie. The auction yard baked under that sun, its wooden rails creaking, its air thick with sweat and laughter. Elias Boone stood at the far edge, hat shadowing his eyes, boots heavy with failure. The last $20 he owned sat folded in his rough palm, creased. Tired, like him, he'd come to sell the tools from his barn. But when he saw the foal, everything changed. It was barely standing, thin legs trembling, white ribs like fence posts under a hide the color of moonlight gone wrong. Its mane was tangled, matted with burrs and dried blood. The auctioneer looked annoyed just calling its name. No one bid. A few men snickered. Jeb Turner, who once shared a drink with Elias when fortune was kind, called out, "That bag of bones ain't worth the rope it's tied with." Elias's jaw worked once, but he said nothing. Something about the foal's eyes, quiet, lost, almost apologetic, cut through the noise. He raised his hand. The yard went still for a breath. "You serious, Boone?" The auctioneer barked. Elias just nodded. The hammer fell. Laughter broke loose again, hard and mean. He handed over his $20. The man counted it slow, mocking. But Elias didn't care. He took the rope, gave a gentle tug, and the foal stumbled forward. They walked through the dust together, a pair of broken things walking away from the noise of the world. That night, under a roof that leaked when it rained, Elias fed the foal with a tin bowl and a quiet heart. He softened old oats in warm water, watching the little creature nose at the feed with tired gratitude. The air smelled of hay, rust, and faint smoke from the stove. He stroked its neck, murmured nonsense words just to keep it calm. "We'll make it, you and me," he said softly. "One more try." He named him Chance. It felt foolish on his tongue, but some foolish things were worth believing in. When he brushed the foal's mane, his fingers caught on something hard. He frowned, felt the lump again, something tangled deep inside the matted hair. But the animal shivered, and he let it be. The night was for warmth, not curiosity. The next morning, Elias walked the few miles into town. The snowmelt had turned the dirt roads into soft red mud, and his boots left deep tracks. When he pushed open the door to Dawson's general store, the bell above it chimed like a memory. Clara Mae Dawson stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled, sorting tins of coffee. Her hair was tucked beneath a worn bonnet, and her eyes, storm gray, patient, met his with a look that held both surprise and kindness. "Elias Boone," she said, voice low and even. "Didn't think I'd see you in town again." "Didn't think I'd come," he said. He set 2 horseshoes on the counter. "Trade you these for a bit of feed, if you've got any left." She looked at the shoes, then at him. "Still making them yourself?" He nodded. "They're good work," she said after a pause, sliding a small sack of oats toward him. "And you always undercharge." He hesitated. "I can't afford." "Didn't say I was selling," she interrupted gently. Elias swallowed hard. "Much obliged, ma'am." As he left, she stepped to the window and watched him cross the road. She saw him stop beside a small white foal tied near the hitching post, speaking to it softly, stroking its ears as if apologizing for the world. Something in that sight made her chest ache, the tenderness of a man who'd lost everything but hadn't forgotten how to care. Inside, 2 old men whispered by the stove. "Boone's gone mad," one said. "Buying dying horses with money he don't have." But Clara said nothing. That night, in the half-light of his barn, Elias brushed the foal again. The creature nickered softly, leaning into his hand. The air was cool and still. When his fingers passed through the mane this time, the tangled lump gave way. Something small and hard fell into the straw with a dull clink that he crouched down, curious, brushing away the hay. And there it was, a little gold locket, dulled with age, its chain broken. His name wasn't on it, but someone's was, engraved in careful script, E.D. He turned it in his hands, brow furrowing. With a hesitant thumb, he opened it. Inside, painted with a fine brush, was the image of a woman and a child. The kind of thing you carry close when you've lost more than you can bear. He sat there for a long time, the foal's quiet breathing filling the silence. To be why morning, he'd made up his mind. He rode into town again, the locket heavy in his pocket. When he pushed open the store door, Clara looked up from her ledger. "I found something strange," he said, setting the locket on the counter. Her hands froze. For a moment, she just stared. Then her breath caught. Where did you? She reached out, tracing the initials with trembling fingers. That was my sister's. Elias frowned. Your sister? She disappeared. Years back. After the fire at our old homestead. We thought everything was gone. Her, the gold, the whole place. He looked down at the locket, then at her. Then maybe this little one came from where she fell. She looked through the store window, where the foal waited, sunlight catching its white coat. Her eyes shimmered with tears she didn't let fall. She was carrying Dawson gold that night. My father's last shipment from the mine. No one ever found it. Elias nodded slowly. Maybe fate still got one more message for you. She met his eyes, something fragile and bright between them. Maybe it does. When he turned to leave, she stopped him. Elias, she said softly, don't lose hope so easy. He tipped his hat, the faintest smile on his lips. Trying not to. That evening, back at his ranch, he sat on the old porch, watching the sun bleed across the land. The foal grazed nearby, stronger now, the wind brushing through its hair. Elias turned the locket over in his palm, its metal catching the last light of day. He whispered, half to himself, half to the world. You brought me more than company, didn't you? The prairie wind answered in sighs, moving through the grass like a ghost of memory. That night, Elias dreamed of mountains and rivers glinting gold beneath the moon, and a woman's voice, faint and sorrowful, calling for her child. When he woke before dawn, the locket was still clutched in his hand, warm as if it carried a heartbeat of its own. Spring crept into the hills, quiet as forgiveness. The snow melted from the high ridges, turning the gullies into streams that whispered over stone. Elias Boone's world, once dry and colorless, began to breathe again. The full chance had filled out, no longer trembling when he stood. His coat had turned from dull gray white to something alive with shine. Each day, the animal followed him like a shadow, nosing at his sleeve, watching his every move. One morning, before sunrise, Chance startled awake and began to pace the paddock, nostrils flaring. Then, with a sudden toss of his mane, he broke through the half-mended gate and bolted north toward the high country. Elias called after him, but the wind took his words. He saddled up the old mule and followed, the chill biting his cheeks as dawn cracked open over the prairie. They rode for hours through canyons of red rock and wind, through places where only silence remembered names. Chance's tracks led straight through a narrow ravine where the sun could barely reach. When Elias rounded the bend, the foal stood still, ears twitching, eyes fixed on something glimmering in the dust. Elias slid off his mule and knelt beside it. The ground was littered with flakes of gold, no bigger than fingernails, catching the early light. His fingers shook as he brushed them aside and found what looked like an old saddlebag, half buried and torn. The pattern on the leather matched the initials from the locket. Inside the shredded cloth were small chunks of rock veined with gold, and a folded piece of weathered fabric, embroidered faintly with the Dawson crest. He stared for a long while, then looked at the foal, who had come closer, pressing its nose to his shoulder. You brought me here, didn't you? He said softly. You carried her memory. All this time. The canyon wind sighed, slow and warm, and Elias felt something in him unclench, a grief older than words. He filled his pockets with a few nuggets, enough to prove truth but not greed, and left the rest undisturbed beneath the rocks. Then he rode back, the foal trotting faithfully beside him, their shadows long and thin against the rising sunny dusk. The town was alive with talk. Dust rose as Elias rode down Main Street, gold-lace saddlebag hanging at his side. Jeb Turner leaned against the saloon post, his smirk faltering when he saw what Boone carried. Well, look what the wind blew back, Jeb drawled. But his voice was thin. Elias dismounted and laid a single gold nugget on the table inside the saloon. The laughter died in the room like a candle snuffed. Sheriff Cole Harding leaned close, eyeing it. Where'd you strike that? Elias met his gaze. Didn't strike it. Found what was lost. And that was all he said. By morning, everyone knew. Gold in the North Ridge. The Dawson gold, the one whispered about for years. But when the prospectors came knocking at his ranch, Elias said nothing. He showed them no map, no proof. He'd already decided what mattered. He rode instead to Clara May's store as the sky turned honey-colored. She looked up, surprise and fear in her eyes when she saw the pouch he carried. "This was your sister's," he said, setting it gently on the counter. Not all of it, but enough to lay her to rest. She opened the pouch, the glint of gold catching tears on her lashes. "You could have kept it, Elias. No one would have known." He shook his head. "Some things don't belong to the living. They just pass through us until they find their way home." She stepped closer. "You could have walked away rich." He smiled, a slow, tired smile. "Maybe I did." Her hand brushed his, soft and uncertain. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. And you," he said quietly, "gave me a reason to believe in tomorrow." The wind outside picked up, rattling the store sign. For a heartbeat, they stood in silence. Two souls who had known too much loss to mistake what stood between them for chance. And in the months that followed, the ranch began to breathe again. The fences were mended. The roof no longer leaked. The fields shimmered green after the spring rains. Chance ran strong through the tall grass, mane flying, a ghost made flesh. The old barn filled once more with the sounds of life, tools clinking, the gentle low of cattle, the rhythm of someone rebuilding without pride, only peace. Clara began visiting often. Sometimes she brought bread, sometimes coffee, sometimes only her company. They spoke little but said much in the quiet, their silences threaded with comfort, with the slow warmth of something growing that didn't need to be named. When Elias looked at her, he saw not the widow who'd lost her family, but a woman who still believed in light after fire. And she, when she looked at him, no longer saw a poor man, but one who'd learned how to listen, to animals, to wind, to the language of mercy. Summer rolled in golden. On certain evenings, when the sun leaned low and the air smelled of sage, Elias would rest on his porch, Clara beside him, and Chance grazing by the fence. Sometimes he'd tell her about the canyon, the gold, the quiet, the moment he knew the world hadn't given up on him. And sometimes she'd just listen, smiling, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Years later, travelers passing through those parts would speak of him, the man who found gold and gave it away, who turned ruin into grace. They said his ranch sat where the light always lingered, where even the wind seemed to hum with kindness. If anyone asked him about his fortune, Elias Boone would lean against his fence post and answer with a half grin. "I traded my last $20 for a little mercy. The rest was grace." The foal, now a strong white stallion, would lift its head from the pasture, eyes calm, as if remembering the day dust turned to gold at dusk. Elias would take out the locket, its gold now smooth from the warmth of his hands. He'd open it, look at the painted faces inside, and whisper a quiet prayer for the souls who never made it home. Then he'd glance toward the cabin where Clara's lantern glowed through the window, soft and steady. And he'd know that home had found him instead. And if you were standing there beside that fence, with the smell of hay and earth and wind all around, he'd tell you one last thing before the night settled in. When the world takes everything, and you think you're down to nothing but dust and hope, give something anyway. You never know what might come trotting out of the dark to meet you. Then he'd smile, and the horizon would blush with the last light of the day, gold on gold, like mercy turned to memory.